This video was made possible by Mizizi International, the official African diaspora clothing brand. Visit mizizishop.com for more information. The 1994 Rwandan genocide was a horrific event marked by the mass slaughter of approximately 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus in just 100 days, fueled by long-standing ethnic tensions and political instability. But despite ample warnings and evidence of the impending genocide, the international community, particularly Western powers, failed to act to prevent the bloodshed. There is a widespread consensus among scholars and observers that the West, including the United States, France, and Belgium, neglected their moral responsibility and failed to take decisive action to halt the violence. However, despite this acknowledgement, very few Western powers have formally accepted responsibility or issued a formal apology for their inaction during this dark period in Rwandan history. But now, French President Emmanuel Macron has boldly stated that France and his allies could have stopped the genocide but deliberately failed to do so. How did the Rwandan genocide unfold? What role did France and other European countries play in this genocide? And why did Western powers fail to intervene and stop the rampant killings? In today's video, we will offer deep insight into these questions and many more. Before we dive into our topic today, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channels and ringing the bell to be notified of all our exciting future videos. On Thursday, March 4, 2024, French President Emmanuel Macron made an explosive admission about France and the West's role in the 1994 Rwandan genocide as the African country prepares to make the 30th anniversary of the killings which left over 800,000 people dead. In a video to be posted on social media on Sunday, April 7, 2024, the day Rwanda will mark the anniversary of the genocide, Macron will admit that when the phase of total extermination against the Tutsis began, the international community had the means to know and act. Macron also believes that at the time, the international community had already witnessed genocide through the Holocaust in World War II and the mass murders of Armenians in Ottoman Turkey during World War I, so they cannot claim to have been unaware that the situation in Rwanda was a genocide. Macron will then go on to acknowledge France's failure to act decisively during one of Rwanda's darkest periods, claiming that France, along with its Western and African allies, had the ability to act and stop the genocide, but eventually failed due to a lack of political will or determination. During a visit to Rwanda in 2021, Macron acknowledged France's responsibilities in the genocide and stated that only survivors could bestow the gift of forgiveness. However, he did not issue an apology, and Kagame, who led the Tutsis insurrection that halted the genocide, has long advocated for a stronger statement. A historical commission established by Macron and directed by historian Vincent Duclerc determined in 2021 that France had failed Rwanda and the then President François Mitterrand, but added that there was no evidence Paris was implicated in the killings. The Rwandan genocide of 1994 was a tragic episode stemming from deep-rooted ethnic tensions between the Hutu majority and the Tutsi minority, fueled by decades of political manipulation and colonial legacies. The catalyst was the assassination of Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana, who was a Hutu, on April 6, 1994, sparking a systemic campaign of mass killings orchestrated by extremist Hutu elements within the government, military, and militias. Over 100 days, an estimated 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were brutally murdered, often with machetes and other crude weapons, while countless others endured rape, torture, and displacement. The aftermath left Rwanda shattered, with a traumatized populace, decimated infrastructure, and a deeply scarred social fabric. Beyond Rwanda, the genocide had profound ripple effects throughout East Africa, leading to refugee crisis, destabilization in neighboring countries. But what role did France and other European powers play in all of this? European colonial powers purposefully planted, watered, and nourished the tree of hatred until its fruits ripened. In 1994, Belgian occupation of Rwanda, as well as France's full domination over the country in the post-colonial era, rebuilt Rwandan society and culture, establishing divisive ethnicity-based policies that created the conditions for genocide. The Belgian occupation of Rwanda, which began in 1916 during World War I, solidified existing social hierarchies by imposing identity cards that categorized individuals based on ethnicity, primarily Hutu, Tutsi, or Twa. These divisions were based on colonial stereotypes that portrayed Tutsis as more civilized and Hutus as inferior. The Belgians favored the Tutsi minority, granting them positions of power and privilege, further alienating the Hutu majority and contributing to resentment and ethnic rivalries. After Rwanda gained independence in 1962, political power shifted to the Hutu majority. However, the ethnic divisions entrenched by colonial rule persisted and were exploited by post-colonial leaders to maintain control. France's involvement in Rwanda, particularly during the presidency of Juvenal Habyarimana, further exacerbated ethnic tensions. France supported Habyarimana's regime and provided military assistance, enabling his government to maintain power through authoritarian rule. This was at a time when Hutus were dominant, that many Tutsis, including a 2-year-old Paul Kagame, had to flee to neighboring Uganda and adopt Anglophone culture. While in Uganda, Kagame went on to form the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF, with other Tutsis in exile to overthrow the Hutu-dominated government back home. When RP forces, led by Paul Kagame, invaded the country in 1990, France sent troops, purportedly to evacuate French people, but they stayed there for 3 years, transforming the so-called humanitarian mission into extensive military cooperation with the regime. The French mission was directly responsible for supplying, training, strengthening, and expanding the Rwandan government army, which went on to perpetrate the genocide. Gilles Cholet, a French lieutenant colonel, was even designated Habyarimana's special military counselor. In this context, France firmly supported the sovereignty of the Francophone Hutu-led administration, while ignoring the institutionalized discrimination and persecution of Tutsis who remained in Rwanda, which eventually led to the genocide. Outside of the colonial context, the West is still to blame. According to a recent investigation by the Belgian Senate, the United Nations, as well as the governments of Belgium, France, and the United States were aware of the killings beforehand but failed to act. The Belgian Commission's findings revealed that a high-ranking UN military official had forewarned that extremist fractions within the Rwandan military were preparing to initiate violence against their adversaries. This premonition materialized shortly after the assassination of Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana on April 6, 1994, triggering a descent into genocide. Canadian Major General Romeo Dallaire, then commander of the UN peacekeeping force in Rwanda, reportedly transmitted a cable to the United Nations 3 months prior, on January 11, 1994, cautioning of imminent attacks. This communication was directed to General Maurice Baril of the UN Division of Peacekeeping in New York and was allegedly shared with Belgium, the United States, and France, who did not act on the intelligence. The United Nations failed to act because the permanent members of the Security Council at the time characterized the conflict as a civil war, so they could rationalize not taking action to stop the genocide. For America, the Clinton administration was still facing widespread condemnation for the deaths of 7 US soldiers during the 1993 mission in Somalia. Fears of a repeat catastrophe in Africa are frequently cited as a reason for the decision to not intervene in Rwanda. Besides, the East African nation at the time had little drive in terms of natural resources or oil reserves, further disincentivizing America from intervening because there was no national interest at stake. On a 1998 state visit to Kigali, Clinton himself formally apologized for US inaction, and in a 2013 interview with CNBC, he shamefully admitted that if America had provided as few as 10,000 troops, roughly 300,000 Rwandan lives could have been saved.
But if we just, been 10,000 of a global contingent of 20 and fanned out, we probably could have saved 300,000 of those people's lives. It had an enduring impact on me.
On the part of France, Paris was so obsessed with the constant fear that French culture was being attacked by English-speaking groups in Africa. As such, the French government turned a blind eye to the precursors of the genocide and the ongoing genocide itself, while secretly hoping that the Hutus would prevail for Francophonie to be entrenched in Rwanda. As for Belgium, it had the largest contingent in the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda, which was formed in October 1993 to keep the peace there. However, after 10 Belgian peacekeepers were killed on April 7, one day after the genocide had begun, Belgium succumbed to domestic pressure to remove its forces from the peacekeeping mission, significantly weakening the outfit's response to the ongoing genocide. Western media outlets also failed to report extensively on the genocide because there was no internal pressure from citizens that could have influenced policymakers. It is undeniably heartbreaking to acknowledge that powers like France, America, Belgium, and the United Nations consciously ignored the Rwandan genocide of 1994, driven by selfish interest and hypocrisy. The failure to intervene, despite early warnings and evidence of impending catastrophe, is a stain on the collective conscience of the international community. Moreover, numerous accounts suggest that a relatively small increase in the peacekeeping force in Rwanda, coupled with a slight display of resolve by the UN Security Council and other influential nations, could have prevented the genocide from escalating to genocidal proportions. While some countries, including Belgium, America, and France, have acknowledged their role in the tragedy and offered apologies, Rwanda will forever bear the scars of betrayal, never forgetting how the West turned its back on them when it mattered most, simply because they lacked the will to act. Your perspective matters. What do you make of Macron's admission that France and the West could have stopped the Rwandan genocide but failed to do so due to the lack of political will? Share your insights and thoughts in the comments below. For continued updates on global affairs and diplomatic developments, be sure to subscribe to the New Africa channel. Stay informed, stay engaged. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to bringing you more insightful content in the future.